We don't really direct our lives unaided and unobstructed. Our being is subject to all the chances of life. There are so many things we are capable of that we could be or do. The potentialities are so great that we never, any of us, are more than 1/4 fulfilled. Words of Anne Porter.
The loop system's not working.
Okay. I will have to, during the hymn, I will see during the hymn what I can do about it. I will see what I can do during the hymn. Good morning. Welcome to Cross Street Chapel's Sunday worship. I'm grateful for your time here with us today. I'm grateful for the effort and opportunity that you've taken to be with us, seeking whatever it is that you need, be it a chance for sorrow and tears, be it a chance to share joy and laughter, be it to hear a few words of wisdom, or perhaps just a chance to rest with the divine. Whatever it is that you seek here, I hope it will be found, as well as a warm community. Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. We begin our service as well with the lighting of our chalice, a Unitarian ritual and tradition performed across the world on Sundays and other days of the week. Today we have the words of the Reverend David Johnson. We light our chalice this morning as a reminder that in the face of improbable odds, life's ember burns and glows, a corner of warmth and awareness amidst the coldness of space and the indifference of time. And so with the lighting of our chalice, our worship begins. We move, as I often say, in this sort of concentric circles, the Mation, today from Catherine Ann Porter about the gift that we have living with other people. And then we move to Unitarian ritual and the lighting of our chalice. And we turn now to the recitation of our covenant, which is something the chapel developed a few years ago. So if you're watching online, it will appear on the screen. If you're here in person, you should have an order of worship, which will include the words. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. Moving now to the final circle, that of our own being and essence, we turn to a time of prayer. Eternal Spirit, beyond and within, whatever it is that we find enveloping us, whether debts, trespasses, sins, foibles, help us to remove them and to start again. Help us to be our authentic selves, as free as children, as wise as our elders, as brave as our fighters, and as compassionate as our peacemakers. The shackles, be it guilt, shame, or unjust obligation, hold us down. Keep us from becoming our true selves. Provide for us this key that our bondage may come to an end. And if grace leads us out of servitude, let us remember this does not isolate us. Let our freedom be a reminder that we must support others, either through fighting their cause, acting compassionately towards them. If we are to find that we hold the chains that limit their humanness, may we be brave enough to cast these chains aside and ask forgiveness. We keep in mind those who are not free, those who, due to ill health, are unable to join us. We remember those who have stepped beyond our knowledge, and all affected by their absence. Those we can no longer hold, may they be held in the continuing presence of the universe and the grace of the divine. We turn now to our first hymn, which is in the Green Book, number 174, A Church is a Living Fellowship, with the words by Frank Claiborne. For those online, it will appear on the screen. So hymn number 174.
Where we share their hopes
Thank you. And thank you, Ugnius. This is the first time, I suppose, actually in, I think, about a year and a half that we've had sort of live hymn playing. We sang hymns last week, but they were still accompanied to the recording, so it was great to actually feel like we can connect to that. So thank you. We have a story and a reading before we have our sermon. The story being one I've told before. It's one of my favorites, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with it, called The Leaky. I normally have a few props that go along with this. You might guess at least what one of them is, but sadly I don't have it today. So you're going to have to imagine, though I'll perhaps make use of the space thanks to our sound system, which allows me to move a bit more than I have in the past year or so. So anyway, this is a story about a little girl who lives with her family, and they're fairly impoverished. She has to travel every morning to a river to collect water for the family for that day. And she does this every day. She starts out at home, and then she walks along the pathway a couple miles, makes it to the river, and then collects the water in 2 buckets, and then comes back to her home. And it's enough water for the family for that day. And the next day it's the same process, and the same process, and the same process. She enjoys it. She likes the walk. Obviously good exercise. However, the family have one beautiful, shiny, new bucket. And they have one that is less so, shall we say. It is a leaky bucket. It's been with them for a long time. And it is old and worn out, shall we say. Worn out enough so that she goes and she collects the water, and as she brings it back, the water sloshes and drips out, and by the time she gets home, it's nearly empty. Say a full bucket of water, and between them, that's enough water for the whole family for that day. This bucket was very self-conscious, this leaky bucket. It was very upset, and she heard it crying one day. "Oh, you should get rid of me. I'm just an old leaky bucket. I serve you no more. You need to get another shiny bucket, and you'll have more water for your family." And she said, "Oh, don't be silly. I love having you. You've been with us for generations, and we need to keep you in the family." And that day it was the same thing. She took the two buckets, the new one and the leaky one, and she gathered up the water, and she came back, one full, one nearly empty. And again the leaky bucket cried out, "Get rid of me, get a new bucket. Surely you can manage and afford it." But still, she insisted, "No, we want to keep you." And the next day it was the same thing. We go and we collect the water, one full, and less so, and less so, and less so, and less so, until it's nearly empty. And finally the bucket said, "I've had enough. Why will you not get rid of me?" And she said, "I want you to do something for me. The next time we go out, just look at the trail. Pay attention to the path we take." And the bucket thought this was kind of weird, but okay, I'll follow that. We don't often talk about the fact that it's a talking bucket itself being kind of weird. But so, she has the bright, shiny new bucket in her left hand and the leaky bucket in her right hand. And she goes, and the leaky bucket is looking down the path, and it's just, your run-of-the-mill dirt path, nothing exciting. And she collects the water, and as she's coming back, the bucket's looking, and it's seeing all of these gorgeous flowers along the pathway. And she gets back, and the leaky bucket, again, obviously this didn't help. "I don't know why you had me do this exercise." And she said, "Well, what did you see going down?" And he said, "Well, I didn't see anything. I just saw a dirt path." And she said, "Well, what did you see coming back?" "Well, I saw lots of beautiful flowers." And she said, "Well, who do you think grew the flowers?" And the leaky bucket had to think about it and realize that every time it was filled up and it was coming along that pathway, The new shiny bucket, it wasn't contributing any water to the pathway, but this leaky bucket was gradually watering all of these beautiful flowers to enlighten and beautify and make everyone's day just a bit more colorful. So after that, the leaky bucket appreciated that perhaps it wasn't simply about gathering water, but it was about giving the water away. Thank you. We turn now as well to our reading today, which is Because We Spill Not Only Milk by the Reverend Nancy Schaefer. Because we spill not only milk, knocking it over with an elbow when we reach to wipe a small face, but also spill seed on soil we thought was fertile, but isn't. And also spill whole lives, and only later see in fading light how much is gone, and we hadn't intended it. Because we tear not only cloth, thinking to find the true edge and instead only making a hole, but also tear friendships when we grow, and whole mountainsides because we are so many, and we want to live right where the black oaks lived, once very quiet and still. Because we forget not only what we are doing in the kitchen and have to go back to the room we were in before, remember why it was we left, but also forget entire lexicons of joy and how we lost ourselves for hours, yet all that old, and also forget the hungry not at our table. Because we weep not only at jade plants caught in freeze and precious papers left in rain, but also at legs that no longer walk or never did, although from the outside they look like most others, and also weep at words said once as though they might be rearranged, but which, once loose, refuse to return, and we are helpless. Because we are in love so deeply, we will never have enough days. We need the gift of starting over again, just this constant good, this saving hope. Because We Spill Not Only Milk by Nancy Schaefer. We all have our cross to bear. These words, often spoken to someone facing challenges, are presumably spoken with some intention of care. I hope the person saying them is doing so as a way to acknowledge that as grief and heartbreak are part of life, the grieving and heartbroken are not alone. That amidst the suffering of one, so many others sit nearby. We may be considered fellows in pain. You're not alone. We all have our crosses to bear. But, of course, I suspect many of us would acknowledge that such words are instead heard rather aggressively. You think you have problems? So does everyone else. Big whoop. Things haven't worked out? Welcome to the club, pal. The words act not as an invitation to share in sorrow, but rather as a statement of fact that closes all the doors. The conversation is finished with this mock reverential understanding that, well, we all have our crosses to bear. The injury caused by these words was driven home to me many years ago. Prior to ministerial training, I would attend lectures at Luther King House, one lecture being the annual Whitley Lecture, which has been running since 1949 in honor of the Baptist minister W.T. Whitley. The 2012 lecture was given by the Reverend Sally Nelson. Reverend Nelson spoke of the challenges that she faced after the birth of her daughter, who face significant physical and mental impairments. Amongst the items was the inappropriateness of this expression, "We all have our crosses to bear," which is something she heard, even from her congregation. What were they saying? That her daughter was her cross to bear? That her daughter's natural state was her daughter's cross to bear? And what does bearing our cross actually imply? Because it's spoken as some challenge that we have to face. When that challenge is a little child, or a person's inherent makeup, it becomes a judgment upon them, claiming that they are less than whole, less than, who say, well, we all have our crosses to bear. The expression reminds me of another. Misery loves company. Another cynical and dark, often the scowl that passes from person to person. A feeling of anger that moves from an individual to a neighbor, to a barista, to a customer, to a colleague, to a partner, and to a child, and on, as a perverse game of telephone. Misery loves company, so we'll bring someone down to our level and feel a certain glee in this mutual frustration. But it's important to remember that even in its primary illustration, the cross was not natural. Even in the case of Jesus, the cross was placed upon him. He had prayed just the night before to have this cup taken from him. In the same way, we might consider disability to often be something that is placed upon people. There is a perspective that it is society which is disabling, and not an individual's construction. Were all doors to be 3 feet tall, many of us would be considered disabled. So it becomes society's responsibility to engineer the environment for as many as possible, to promote a culture that inspires as many as possible, and to develop a governance and economics that support as many as possible. It is vital that we understand that when we speak of society, we are not speaking apart from it. We are within the world. So a call for society to improve its physical space is necessarily a call to us, a responsibility that we all hold. Not merely idle thought or philosophizing, but engagement with those who need a more inclusive world. Listen to people's comments, and you will see where your power lies. We have a greater strength than we often think. However, as strong as we find ourselves, as productive and effective we turn out to be, even with this effort, we still fall short. Reverend Nelson, though imploring a greater ethic and conversation towards and around the issue of disability, also acknowledges that how we want to see the world, full of active and able participants, will not be manifested. Some of this falls in line with a Christian perspective, such as in the prayer, "Thy will be done," a recognition that we are not the center of the world, that we hold a perspective of it, just as everyone else does. We too, with or without our blessing, look at the world from the margins. And for all of us, there comes a point where we want this cup, that broken cup of our being, to be taken from us. In the story of the leaky bucket, we hear of one who is ashamed of their brokenness. The bucket sees things. It thinks that its primary purpose is to care for the family, to provide them with water, and in that way it fails. even though the family never goes without, the sense that the bucket is not living up to its full potential is mortifying for it, and so it expresses a desire to be replaced. Likewise, I think we sometimes fixate too much on living up to our full potential, without acknowledging that our time on earth can occupy many purposes. So stepping back from a sense of a singular purpose, allowing ourselves to simply exist and to see what comes from this existence, will reveal the beautiful flowers that we have grown along the pathway of our lives. Shifting our attention from the spotlight, focused on one goal, one ambition, one drive, and instead looking out as a lantern, perhaps not as brightly in any individual direction, but able to illumine a greater breadth. Shifting from the narrow to the wide will reveal the broad panorama of our life's influence. There will be times when we see ourselves as a leaky bucket, and like Nancy Schaefer's words, we will feel so imperfect and yet still give. We see the woundedness in the world. We feel it in our bodies, and still we mourn and grieve and seek to resolve. There is a drive in us greater than all the dismay that we face. Own that, own up to that, and the relationship you have fostered will hold you when you feel like everything around you is cracking. Reverend Nelson was asked, which presented our broken humanness as inherent, with Jesus' call to heal. She thought for a moment and she replied, "When I was in hospital, no one visited. When I attended with me, a conversation wouldn't have changed the circumstances of my life, but it may have made it more bearable." Misery loves company, but not in the cynical way that we imagine it. It simply wants another to share the grief, not out of jealousy or malice, but because life is difficult. We do have challenges, both imposed by society and by our natural existence in the world. But so long as we have others nearby who are willing to honestly listen to solutions without judgment, without platitudes, then our crosses will be just a little bit lighter to bear. Even in our most acute brokenness, we are giving something to the world. Let's look to the flowers. They will guide us on our way. Amen. We turn now to our second hymn, number 179 in the Green Book, A Noble Life by A.S. Isaacs.
Thank you.
We now turn to a chance of time of joys and sorrows. You're invited to share your own, lighting a candle if you're here in person. If you wish to say a few words, please come to the microphone so those listening on the loop system and those listening online at home will be able to participate as well. For those who are listening at home, if you wish to participate, please type into the chat box and I will read your joy or your sorrow out. And as always, if you wish to remain seated, know that your presence here is enough. And I wanted to begin with a request. Robin and Sonia have asked that that a candle be lit for them. Robin was admitted to hospital on Tuesday, and they are still investigating what it could be. I believe it was a severe chest pain. So we hold them in our thoughts and prayers, and we'll continue to look after them as best as we are able.
I just want to say welcome back, Ugnius. We've communicated a lot this past year, but to actually see you is weird in a very good way.
For all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. We return now to a time of prayer with these words of the Terma Collective. May our eyes remain open, even in the face of tragedy. May we not become disheartened. May we find in the dissolution, apathy, and denial the cup of the broken heart. May we discover the gift of the fire burning in the inner chamber of our being, burning great and bright enough to transform any poison. May we offer the power of our sorrow to the service of something greater than ourselves. May our guilt not rise up to form yet another defensive wall. May the suffering purify and not paralyze us. May we endure. May sorrow bond us and not separate us. May we realize the greatness of our sorrow and not run from its touch or its flame. May clarity be our ally and wisdom our support. May our wrath be cleansing, cutting through the confusion of denial and greed. May we not be afraid to see or speak our truth. May the bleakness of the wasteland be dispelled. May the soul's journey be revealed and the true hunger fed. May we be forgiven for what we have forgotten, and blessed with the remembrance of who we really are. We now enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. A few notices before we conclude our service. If you're in need of pastoral care, you can contact me at minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. You can write as well if you would wish to participate in the service, such as providing a reading or otherwise. And if you just joined us, you're welcome to join our mailing list, again by contacting me at minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. We're grateful as well for any donations that can assist the mission of our chapel. You're able to donate online at tinyurl.com/crossstreetdonate, which is appearing for those who are watching online. If anyone who's listening, there will be a formal notice to those on our list. But if you have had a standing order with our CAF account, we are planning to close that. We've had, for the time, accounts, one at CAF and one at TSB. We're shifting everything over to the TSB account, though we're aware there are still a few standing orders. So you can contact me for details, but if you do have a standing order, you'll be contacted about that in due course. So we come now to our final hymn, number 33 in the Green Book, Do You Hear, by Emily Lenore Look-Thorne. Thank you to Ugnius for the music. Thank you to Catherine for the IT, to Anne for greeting, and to Laura for the tea and coffee that we're about to enjoy. And thank you to all of you for creating and sharing worship today. We close with the words of Ray Bradbury. We cannot tell the precise moment when friendship is formed. As in filling a vessel drop by drop, there is at least a drop which makes it run over. So in as kindnesses, there is at last one which makes the heart run over. Amen. Go in peace.